Начинаем. Добрый день, дорогие друзья.
Good day to you, dear friends, dear colleagues, our attendees, and those who have joined us online. My name is Lilia Ostrovskaya. I'm the head of programs for counteracting anti-Semitism of the Russian Jewish Congress. We have got together to discuss a very relevant subject, and it is called hate speech, and that is manifestation of hate online. And we call it a new battle, a new field battle. Why so? Because today the social media have ousted traditional mass media like newspaper, etc. So a lot of important things are going on there, and quite fundamental things, I would say. And it's very important to talk about such things. Today, we are going to discuss that subject from different perspectives. We will see how to measure, how to monitor the hate speech in social media. We will look at the dynamics of them, and also we will talk about verbalics if we are joined by our speaker who is stuck in a traffic jam, and also we will try to see how you can regulate this toxic environment and whether it is possible at all or not. And now I would like to give the floor to Yogov Karasenti, the Director of Department for Fighting Anti-Semitism at the Minister of Diaspora Matters. Yogov, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Lilia. Thank you for having me, and I wish to thank the Russian Jewish Congress for carrying this important event. My name is Yogov Karasenti, and I'm Director for Combating Anti-Semitism at the Ministry for Diaspora Affairs. And I wish to show you some of the features of our anti-Semitism cyber monitoring system and some of the trends that we saw in last year. We started this project some 4 years ago when we realized that what's happening on the social media is not monitored. And actually, there is a big gap regarding what we know about online anti-Semitism. We came to the social media companies. And asked them to monitor anti-Semitism, and they told us it cannot be done. It would take too much labor, and that the algorithms are not sophisticated enough in order to support such initiative. So we went to an Israeli high-tech company and we asked them if they can meet this challenge with small number of people and in a limited budget. And apparently we did manage to see what's happening online. And now the system is operational for about 3.5 years. And we are able to know what's happening regarding online hate speech. So our system is fully automated. We are using indexing, first of all, in order to know if a certain post contains anti-Semitic hate speech. And once it passes the indexing, we use artificial intelligence in order to say what kind of anti-Semitism it is and where it comes from. We are working according to the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism. That's how we define anti-Semitism. We wanted our system to, we wanted our definition to be widely accepted. So we went to the IHRA working definition of anti-Semitism that's been accepted by more than 30 countries. And we actually turned it into an algorithm. And we're analyzing the net real-time, fully automated according to that definition. So our system quantifies, classifies, and geolocalize anti-Semitic discourse. That means that we can know, according to what the surfers say, where is the anti-Semitic discourse coming from, and what kind of anti-Semitism it is. For a certain, for example, if we have a certain anti-Semitic speech, is it classic anti-Semitism? Is it new anti-Semitism? Is it Islamic anti-Semitism? Where is it coming from? And then we can adjust policies in that specific area and be more focused in our budgets in order to combat anti-Semitism. So the system classifies to three main categories: classic anti-Semitism, new anti-Semitism, and Holocaust deny and distortion. And each one of these categories is divided into different subcategories like conspiracy theories, radical Islam, demonization of Jews, glorification of Nazism, and so on and so forth. We are always in a process of adding networks and taking networks off. For example, 3 years ago when we started in the mainstream social media, we saw a lot of anti-Semitism, a lot of classic anti-Semitism. Today, we're seeing much less anti-Semitism on those social medias. So we went on to a smaller networks with less inspection when all the anti-Semites moved to. So today, we are also monitoring 4chan, BitChute, Gab, Mind, Stormfront, and other social medias where those users migrated to. We are working in 6 languages: in English, in French, in German, in Arabic, Spanish, and Russian. And all the data that we are monitoring is open source, open data. Anyone can see it on the net, and that's why we are able to share it with other organizations and other governments. It's all in the open. In the 3.5 years of the operational system, we've monitored more than 13 million posts, as you can see here, with about 1 million anti-Semitic users. You can see that the system is geo-localizing the anti-Semitic speech. You can see that a lot of it is coming from North America, Western Europe. And these, I remind you, in the languages that we monitor and in the social medias that we monitor. If we've put more networks into the system, I guess the picture would have been a bit different. Most of the anti-Semitic hate speech is in English. The other part, 25%, is in Arabic, then about 15% in French. And then we have German, Russian, and Spanish. Another feature that we have is alerts. You can see here that in the last 28 days, we had 53 alerts. The alerts tells us usually about calls for violence, whether it's general calls for violence like kill all Jews, or sometimes even specific calls for violence like I'm going to kill my Jewish neighbors. So that's also part of the information we see in the system, although the system is not aimed to detect such information. But if we come across it, of course, we'll pass it to the right authorities. During this year, we have one main anti-Semitic event, big anti-Semitic event, and that was around the operation of Guardian of the Walls, the conflict between Israel and Gaza. During those 10 days of conflict, the ACMS recorded 250,000 anti-Semitic posts. And this is after the social media companies took a lot of posts off. So once they cleaned the net, we were still able to find 250,000 anti-Semitic posts. It represented about 200% increase compared to regular days. We saw a dramatic surge, we saw a dramatic spike in violent rhetoric, which I will show you in the next slides. And most of what we saw was new anti-Semitism. Today, the social media companies take most of the classic anti-Semitism off the net, but they still allow a lot of new anti-Semitism to stay on the net. They see it sometimes as a legitimate criticism against Israel. And of course, we argue that it's not a legitimate criticism against Israel. We are working according to the IRA working definition. And what's there is defined as anti-Semitism is what we define as anti-Semitism, and we believe that social media should do as well. If we look at the day-by-day development of the anti-Semitic discourse, so you can see the days before, which the level of anti-Semitic discourse was about 7,000, 8,000 anti-Semitic posts per day, and then in the conflict, it raised to about 25,000 anti-Semitic posts per day, most of them in the mainstream social media. if we want to look at the different categories of the anti-Semitic discourse, then you can see that demonization of Israel and delegitimation of Israel constitutes most of the posts. More than 130,000 posts of demonizing the state of Israel. And we say you can criticize the policy, you can criticize politicians, but criticize the right of a state to exist is what we see as anti-Semitism. And here you see the level of the anti-Semitic violent rhetoric. You can see that in the days before the operation, it was quite low, and during the operation, it rise skyrocketing to 400, 450 in the equation that we built, which is, as you can see, much, much higher than regular days. Another thing that we see is the connection between online violent rhetoric to offline incidents. In the times when the violent rhetoric is high, the offline incidents are also high. And this is information from the ADL, the Anti-Defamation League, about incidents in the United States, and from the CST, the Community Security Trust in the UK, about incidents in the United Kingdom during those days when the level of anti-Semitic rhetoric was violent and high. And we see it time and time again. When the level is high, the incidents in the streets are high. There is a spillover between the two. Another thing that we see time and time again lately are organized anti-Semitic campaigns, which are led, I don't know by who, by either it's a state or an entity or an organization or any kind of proxy. You can see an unauthentic behavior comparing Israel to a virus, the COVID-1948, COVID, instead of saying COVID-19, they say COVID-1948, comparing Israel to a virus. And you can see how the graph is rising from zero up and then vanishes again. It tells you that this is unauthentic behavior. Millions and millions have been exposed to this campaign. And what's interesting to see is that big parts of it were carried in Persian. So to give you a hint about these are the kind of things that we see on the net complain to the social networks about such behaviors, and I tell them someone is taking advantage of your net, someone is using your platform in order to proliferate anti-Semitism. Many times they simply ignore it and say there is not much we can do about it. But we believe we can do something about it, and I will show it to you in a second. Another campaign happened this June. About from 54 between the United States. And then again, there is a misuse of this incident. You can see again that this is unauthentic behavior. You can see the graph rising high, we're not developing in its natural development. And again, the use here of classic anti-Semitism motives like Jews that, and here again we can see that big parts of this discourse is happening in Persian and English. So once we saw that we were complaining about such campaigns and the social media companies are not doing enough about in order to prevent it and to stop it, we are developing a new that will automatically in real time, in short time, will be able to identify such campaign, to incriminate them. And if we see that they are actually unauthentic, promoting speech, mainly anti-Semitic hate speech, we'll report them in real time to the social medias and them in order to know what they are about in order to this kind of campaigns. And to sum up, my recommendations to the company, the industries would be, first of all, to adapt the IRA working definition of anti-Semitism as a standard for detection of online anti-Semitism. I know it won't do everything. I know it won't be perfect. This is the best that we have in our hands at this point, and they should all adapt it as a standard. We need to cover online regulation for the IT companies allowance to know what's in the arena, and we must see that the IT companies are preventing harm from
Это наша проблема или его проблемы? Ну, у него или у нас? Yogev, can you hear us? We have connection problems.
I think he's finished.
Как раз, да, совпало с...
Yes, it is a coincidence.
Yogev как раз...
It's a coincidence, or perhaps not, that Yugev was wrapping up his presentation. Well, I feel sorry that he's disconnected because I wanted to address a question to him, but hopefully he will join us talking about hate speech. And in the meantime, we are going to give the floor to our next guest from Australia. This is Andrea Baler, the General Director of Internet Institute to Prevent Hate in Internet. Andrea, the floor is yours.
Thank you. So firstly, thank you very much for having me. As I said when I spoke earlier today, this is my first time in Russia. So it's a pleasure to be here. I must... Okay, 1 second. So I am going to start to take, there we go, just to take some live video from my end for this. Okay, thank you. Do we have the slides? No? This is yours.
Yep.
Yes. Thank you. And if we go to the next slide. Oh, I have. Sorry. Thank you. Okay, great. Thank you. So I want to start by sharing a quote. This is a quote made by a lawyer from a very famous court case, Lycra and Yahoo in 2001. And the quote says, there is this naive idea that the internet changes everything. And the lawyer responds, it doesn't change everything, it doesn't change the laws in France. And for most people doing research on internet law in general, this court case from 2001 is essential because this was the court case and then a follow-up court case in the US that said national governments have sovereignty and have the right to make laws in relation to the internet, and other countries will respect this. But this is very interesting for our topic today. Let's go to, I keep saying to change slides. I have a clicker. Okay, so this is interesting for us because I think this is both true and not true, this quote. Because what we can see is that the battlefield for online hate speech is divided into two theatres of war, to keep the analogy. In the United States, there is a battle which is very hot right now over what is hate speech and what are the limits around it between hate speech and freedom of speech. This is the US battlefront. Outside of the United States, particularly in Europe, the position is very clear. The position is that hate speech must be prohibited, it should be regulated, but the question is, in this theatre of operation, how do we focus with the online element? How do we deal with this? How do we regulate in an environment that goes across borders? What level of intervention is acceptable? What level of intervention is acceptable within your borders compared to outside your borders? So these are the topics I want to look at in more depth. So let's start with the United States and this battle over what is hate speech. There is a long-standing interpretation from the US Supreme Court of the First Amendment that says hate speech is protected under the First Amendment. There is, however, and this was reinforced by the court unanimously as recently as 2017. So this is not just old law, it's old law that has been confirmed recently. So the other side of it, though, is that there is a growing body of legal scholarship that is suggesting that this conventional thinking must be reconsidered. This is a minority position, but a minority position that is growing in the US. The American Bar Association notes this point, that it's a minority, but then makes available a set of resources for lawyers to look at to see what the alternative perspective is, because it is now considered to be important for people to know this. There is also a growing level of medical research that says the idea that hate speech is just words and doesn't cause real harm, and the legal distinction is between words and action. Words don't cause harm, action causes harm, so words should be protected, but actions can be restricted. The medical research says the words cause harm too. The words cause not only mental harm, they actually cause physical harm to people. They reduce life expectancy. They create heart problems. There is a lot of high-quality medical research that says that the old ideas were scientifically wrong. There is another side to this, which is counter-terrorism, where we say we may have allowed hate speech, but we've never allowed terrorism. So what is the border between terrorism and hate speech? And what is permitted for the government to now restrict under terrorism regulations? We saw this particularly with January 6th this year in the United States with the insurrection. This has made this a very hot topic of conversation. The United States has a list of designated foreign terrorist organisations. It has no list for domestic terrorist organisations. There is no way of prescribing a terrorist organisation that is at home in the United States. There is a lot of work, again, and discussions in Congress about, well, this needs to change. There is clearly a domestic threat from white supremacists who are American, both in America, and there are American groups that are being prescribed as terrorist groups by other countries. So if they will be prescribed by other countries, surely they must be prescribed at home. So this theatre is nothing to do with the internet. The internet is just the medium where some of the discussion is hosted. This theatre of the war is about the substance of what is said and where the limits are. What the internet does is makes it easier than ever to research this, to document it, to discuss it, because the internet automatically archives the conversation in most forums, whereas people talking one-to-one in person is not normally documented. You're relying on human memory if someone even hears about it. I just want to show a slide here. This is, again, recent. United States Court upheld a request for data from Facebook about Facebook content inciting genocide in Myanmar. And again, the US court upheld that a country could request this data from Facebook to take to the International Court for cases of war crimes. Again, all I'm saying on this, yes, that Facebook contributed to genocide, this is true, but my point is that even in the US, the court will say the law outside, including the International Court, this is valid, and we will uphold the requests for the information. The other big fight in the US is over Section 230. This is the section of US law that gives immunity to social media platforms, that says that platforms are immune, they are not responsible for what their users post. You can't hold the platform accountable for this. So unlike Germany, that we've heard a lot about, a law like this wouldn't work in the US, not unless they first amend this law. Also, it says that if the platform does intervene, if the platform chooses to remove some of the hate speech, they are not acting like a publisher and they haven't taken responsibility. So even if they intervene some of the time, they are still not required to intervene all of the time. So platforms have it very, very easy under the US law, but there is a lot of challenge on this. But there are two sides to this debate. Outside of the United States, particularly in Europe, the position here is that, as I said, hate speech is much clearer. We agree outside the United States it should be prohibited. The question is, how do we deal with this with the internet? The picture you see here shows part of a fight that happened between the German government and Facebook. There was a rise in racist motivated attacks against immigrants in Germany, and Facebook said, well, the German government was reporting this and saying you must take it down, and Facebook responded, we have no rule in our rules for attacks against immigrants. This is not a protected category for us. And the German government's response is, why do we care what your rules say? You are in Germany and you are going to obey what the law says. And Mark Zuckerberg had to fly to Germany and apologise after this incident. But again, it shows that outside of the United States, states have set the rules and asserted their authority. And this is a very different proposition to within the US. I have a quote here from an agreement some years ago, 2016, between the European Commission and the tech companies. And it's part of efforts to try and first reach agreements with the companies rather than making laws. Let's make an agreement. This didn't work so well. The companies don't always uphold when it's just an agreement and there's no risk of penalty. But what this shows is the tech companies, this was the first time they changed their attitude. They used to say that freedom of speech is most important and everything else is secondary, and therefore we won't intervene. And what this says by agreement of the companies and the governments in a joint press release is that they agree that the negative speech, the hate speech, actually damages freedom of speech. that allowing people to promote hate speech is actually taking away the legitimate speech of other people. And this destroys democracy as well. So to have the tech companies agree with this statement was a big step forward, and it changes the dynamics of the discussion. So then we come to how we regulate. And one of the subtleties is that the law is only breached if the content can be seen in a particular country. So if Russia has a law that you can't have a particular type of content, and the platform blocks the content for Russia, or the platform blocks people from Russia entirely, there is no more legitimacy for the Russian government to make a complaint against this platform because it no longer affects Russia. Okay, this is the same for Germany. Germany has a law, it says it applies everywhere, but only if it's impacting Germany. The issue is that the impact is where the people see it. There used to be an argument that it only matters where the data is stored. And this isn't true because the impact a platform has is where it can influence people's attitudes and thinking. So what we have, as you can see on the slide here, is we need to consider how much authority a country can realistically exercise beyond its borders. If the company that is sharing stuff into Russia has no connection with Russia, other than that it is available to be seen, how much control could the Russian government have? And we have a more concrete example. Just a few weeks ago, Gab, that was mentioned in other talks, Gab was given a notice by the German government that they were in breach of the net law in Germany. And the person from Gab posted saying, I must decide what I do about this. If I ignore it, then maybe I must not leave my country, because if I leave, maybe I'll get extradited to go to Germany to face charges on this. But I'm not going to let the government tell me what I can do, a government that isn't even my government. So, you know, there are challenges here. Some of the options for companies include blocking certain content from appearing in certain countries in order to comply with the local laws. This is one thing the company can do to be safe, to say for every country, we do what that country wants. Another thing they can do is set their own rules to prohibit certain content that they remove globally. And then they can make these rules more tight, more specific than what any one country wants. As long as they meet the law, they can do extra.
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Okay. And as I mentioned, the last option is to ignore what is said and to take the legal risk. I want to move to the bottom line here, which is that different countries will have different standards, and they have a right to impose their own standard for content that is either hosted in their country or viewed within their borders. To do this, they must be able to demand certain hosting services are blocked. That if someone breaches their rules, they must be able to block the content, because if they issue a fine and the person is not in their legal jurisdiction, they can't enforce the fine. So they can keep issuing more and more fines and nothing will happen. So they have to be able to talk to the people that bring the content into their borders, the internet service providers, and say you must block this company. And if someone doesn't block it, every company has another company above them. That's how the internet works. If a company won't comply, they must be able to go to the source above it and say, you have a customer that's not behaving. Either you stop servicing this customer or the penalty comes up to you. We can also have a certain baseline standard set by the international community, international treaties that set a minimum standard that applies for all countries. This is important. And we can do this with terrorism, incitement to violence, with the worst offences, incitement to genocide. Technology companies can exceed the standard of any one country with their own standard. And finally, once we move to a regulatory approach, we need data to ensure that the regulation is being respected, that there is compliance. And we can't rely entirely on AI for this. This is where I disagree with my Israeli colleague that just spoke. The reason is that human creativity will always be better than the AI. It'll always find a way around whatever the AI is looking for. So we have to have a system that takes data from the public, that involves civil society, and that is able to find whatever the AI today can't find, and is able to address this. And this is the final piece we need. Perhaps when we come back to questions, I can show you some slides of the technical solution that my organisation built since 2012, when we presented it with the Global Forum for Combating Anti-Semitism that was run by the Diaspora Ministry and the Foreign Ministry in Israel.
I remember that.
So we've worked with them to originally plan this sort of approach to say we must enable the public. We can't afford to pay people. We can't afford to have government staff monitoring this manually all the time. This is true. But anyone that sees a problem must be able to say something about this, and our system uses artificial intelligence to verify what's reported rather than to find content. It's a different approach that does scale. So with that, I will finish. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, Андре. А сейчас мы переходим.
Thank you very much. And now
мы говорили больше о теории и
we move.
как это работает.
Before that, we've been talking about theory and spoke about what can be done. Now we go to the next speaker,
который, наверное, я надеюсь,
Ms. Madratva,
что с этим
and we hope they'll tell us what can be done and what can be done in terms of fighting hate speech online, and should it be done. Alexander, please.
Okay, so let's begin again. Dear friends on the panel from Australia and Israel, it's a pleasure to see you, and thank you, Lelia, for hosting us. I would like, on behalf of the Combat Anti-Semitism movement that I represent today, to thank the Russian Jewish Congress for hosting us and for minimizing hate speech and combating anti-Semitism whenever and whenever it appears. We are today living in a very complex environment where marginal groups with dangerous ideologies received about 15 years ago, with the creation of social media, free and open platform to share misinformation, fake news, and hatred to millions of people. Content that can be translated in one click and cannot be stopped because we don't have barriers and frontiers between our countries when it is online. So we call it a lot the democratization of the information, but in fact we should call it the dictatorship of hatred. This is what it is. Today, for this forum, I decide to stop explaining the phenomenon of how online anti-Semitism started and focusing on who's responsible and what should change. We heard from Yogev and our colleague from Australia different metrics, different way of understanding the phenomenon. But why? I don't want to explain it, just because it is explained in an obvious way. All cases of violent incident against Jews show that the perpetrators were indoctrinated online using social media, and that should be enough. We don't need to explain more than that. We, the civil society, that I'm only one that I represent here, but we have invested thousands of organizations, millions of dollars in analyzing the phenomenon. We share it with decision makers, like it was explained before, with internet companies. We open discussion, we open forum, and still today we are like at day one. So before it is too late, time has come to end the most dangerous form of spreading anti-Jewish propaganda. We should end it. From this platform today, I call on internet companies worldwide and legislators to take back the lead from the civil society organization that we replaced you 15 years ago. You need to analyze the phenomenon. You need to invest money. You need to invest task force. You need to develop strong legislation and enforce their implementation. And we should not do it, like it was said before. We, the civil society, shouldn't do their work. Jews deserve to be protected on the streets, online, and anywhere else. Internet brought to the world a unique opportunity to connect between all citizens of the planet, to share positive experience and learn about each other. Look, today we have a speaker from Australia, one from Israel, two from Israel actually, but connected via Russia, Moscow. This is incredible. And we all speak together. This is what internet companies should do. The focus on internet companies should be on how hatred should be fought with positive exchanges. It is too often easy to spread anti-Jewish propaganda, so why it is so hard for internet companies to share positive impact solutions? The strategy should be divided in two parts. One, the total adoption of the International Holocaust Remembrance Islands working definition of anti-Semitism, Yogev said, and this is very important, by all internet companies with, and that's very important, in-house monitoring system. They should be equipped with high-level artificial intelligence capacities to reach a level of zero acceptance of anti-Semitism in their platform. They need to share all the data, like it was said before, to everyone online. There is no other solution. This is the basic first step to do everything. I would love to share with you the example of the music industry. And I can challenge every one of you to try to upload a song of Jennifer Lopez, Michael Jackson, or anyone else, and to see how fast it will be deleted by the artificial intelligence. It will read your post, it will read your content, and they will delete it. And if you're asking why, it's just because the music industry has a lot of money to attack back the companies. But when you deal with hatred, and you deal with Jewish hatred, there is no money involved to sue the companies and to attack them back. But it's time that this formula change. It's not about money anymore. It should be about human life. Secondly, having educational programs by the company to connect between people of different faiths and use the platform for proactively engage in the fight and not just to us as the user. I think the second part of the solution is probably the main problem and the question, who is responsible? The companies, us, the civil society, the government, the user? Who need to stop this? And this is the most important question. I will tell you what we believe. First of all, the companies should stop hiding themselves behind the fact that the user are the problem. They allow the user first to spread anything on their platform, and they make the rules, we don't make the rules. So they are responsible. Secondly, governments, legislation, and their law enforcement. I think this is the two keys. We are the civil society, shouldn't deal with that. It's been 15 years of work of Jewish organization, non-Jewish organization, to monitor, to analyze, and it's time to stop. We invest so much money and energy to do that, but at the end of the day, the companies are responsible, as well the government. The same way a Jewish person has been protected in the street, he should be protected online. To end my opening remarks, and I keep some thoughts for the open conversation, I would like to say that we are ready to work with any organization, internet company, and government to build and create and design proper policies to evaluate their implementation, but it's time to change and to accept a zero tolerance policy online like it should be done by a police officer offline. So thank you, Lilia, for hosting this panel, and I look forward for the conversation.
Большое спасибо, Саша.
Thank you very much, Sasha. And after all presentations, we will move on to Q&A. And now I would like to introduce our next guest and speaker. That is Anton Utkin, who is a director, the scriptwriter, and specialist expert for new media. So he will look at it from different perspectives. We are talking about anti-Semitism, but there is another side of hate speech, and that is something what we would like to learn from Anton. The floor is yours. Hello, thanks. Let's take a look at my trailer, and then I would ask you to put my slides on the screen. And the loud you can adjust the volume. The volume. So it's an unusual school, not an ordinary one. So the prize of this month goes to Class B, thanks to Darius' effort. Have you ever been bullied? No, it's a stupid question. Well, remember that any choice has its complications, sometimes quite unexpected. Bullying. It's bullying. Well, congratulations, Big Love. It's the second day in a new school and you already behaved badly in the class. It was you due to who we lost. You just have to be more careful. It's basketball. Next time, solve your problems yourself. People look so small. Well, imagine that they are toys and only you are real. What's wrong with her? I don't know. Maybe she's a teenager. You cannot beat, ignore, and cut down your opponent in any way. I never imposed my opinion. I never looked up messages in anybody else's phone. I never thought things can end up that way. She has not told me anything. Well, children never say anything to anyone. Thank you. Now I would like to see my slides. Well, our small studio does interactive movies, and I will tell you that besides being a director and scriptwriter and one of the co-founders of the studio, I also right now learn Gestalt, and I try to introduce these practices in what I do because it's an important part of a discussion also related to bullying. We are a studio that makes interactive impact kino for cinema for 5 years, and we are one of the first on the planet, what is heartening. So we focus on young adults, that is our target audience, young people in the age of 16 to 25 years. We develop social projects, and we always use facts in our work, so we don't fantasize, we do research, and psychologists and other assistants help us, school psychologists. So things that we talk about in such a way always is based on real facts. And what is important, we use the interactive movie style because interactive movie works in a different way. So here the trailer is called Not a Big Deal, and you can find the movie online, and it's a story about the Bigelow family who moves to a large city, and it's a story of Dasha and Yegor. Dasha is 12 and he's 15, and they are bullied, and we make a choice for the guys what to do. So Yegor is bullied, and they want him to do badly, for instance, to push one of his opponents, and then things can develop in a different way because if he decides not to do it, the other guys in class can spoil his clothes, and the bullying will extend. And if he joins a bad company, there will be different things. Dasha finds herself in a different story, and there is also a story of mom. She's also bullied at work, so it is quite a complicated situation. The most interesting thing is that the choice has to be made by a viewer, and the bad end of scenario is that Dasha jumps off the top of the roof, and this is something what we would like to prevent, and we act as an agent from the future who can change the chronology of events, she can change the past, and we try to correct the situation for the better. So it is kind of game. And why is it interactive? Why did we choose this format? We've been using it for 4 years, and that is the fourth social project that we do. We have realized that it works beautifully with young adults because they were grown with a device stuck to their hand, and for them this format is very convenient, and they really feel empathy, they are fascinated, and the young adults can see some can look at challenging stories in this quite easy format. And if the viewer accepts it, you can continue the game. If not, then you can just watch the movie. Nothing serious about that. And if you're not ready to participate in this interactive story, just continue watching, and that's it. So there are various ways to go in this scenario. And we believe that social projects are the future for cinematography, because here we can bring together very challenging topics that people are not always ready to talk about, or that arouse lots of pain. And you can talk about them in an easy way, and that's appealing for young adults. And actually, we developed this track together with actors. We brought some corrections. And what is unique, young school children participate in movie shooting, and many of them indeed have been bullied, and they feel sad. But it's also great that as we communicate with them, we can change this scenario, we can adjust it to real events and come up with things like that. I believe that the future of such stories, the future of this discourse, is about engaging the young audience. And that is what we can do. I'm done. Thanks.
Большое спасибо. Я очень бы хотела вернуться к первой.
Thank you. Though I would like to go back to the first presentation. And I wanted to ask our first two speakers, Andrei and Yugeva. We spoke about how we can monitor and regulate hate speech. The question is, should it be done? As Yugev said, those haters, they migrate from one platform to another. Does it make sense to fight them in one way or another?
Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
Okay, so our first aim, our first goal in this initiative was to push the extremists from the mainstream. We want them to leave the mainstream social medias. We want to reduce their exposure. We want less and less people to be exposed to their toxic propaganda. So I believe we succeeded in that with the social media companies. We told them, listen, you're being abused. These people are abusing your networks. As Sasha mentioned before, the internet was supposed to be a tool for connecting people, for bringing people together. And this is against the idea of the internet. So we managed, for example, to reduce in, I believe, 60-70% classic anti-Semitism on the social media. We managed to close accounts of leading anti-Semites, of their main ideologies. So it does work. And we know they will migrate to a smaller network, to less inspected places. And we are following them there.
Andrei, do you want to respond?
Yeah. Look, we've seen a massive rise on platforms like Parler and Gab as people have been pushed off the other platforms. But this rise is not only extremists. I did some work with the American Jewish Congress, and our work showed how many of the Republican supporters went along with the extremists into Gab, into a platform where we looked at one politician and one politician using Gab to raise funds, and 40% of their supporters were also posting white supremacist content or posting QAnon content. So the extremists have, yes, they've moved to, we don't say smaller platforms anymore. These are now just minimally moderated platforms is the term being used. But the problem is if other people go with them, then those other people are in a much richer environment to be radicalised. And this is a different problem we now have. I think the solution is we need platforms. Platforms can only impose certain limits up to banning someone permanently or banning for some time, as been discussed. There must be a point where repeated bad behaviour leads the platform to say, as a platform, we can't stop this person. Our penalty is having no impact. And at this point, the platform must inform the government wherever this person is from, and stronger action needs to be able to take place. But this requires a new type of cooperation.
Спасибо. Thank you. Саша, я хотела... sorry. You want to add? Ты хочешь добавить?
I just wanted to say that I'm agreeing with Andre on that. I believe that we can only work so far with our monitoring, and the companies can also only do so much. And there need to be a better cooperation regarding repeated anti-Semitism that comes from certain actors. And if a certain jurisdiction, if a certain court already decided on a certain player that he is an anti-Semitic player, and if he has been convicted as anti-Semites, by the way, this goes back to the social media networks, they must act against him and they must limit him because our courts, believe, have better tools to judge these behaviors than the social media does. So if a court decides someone is an anti-Semite, the networks cannot let him spread his propaganda, and vice versa.
Just a very small, if I can clarify something Yogev said, it's not just the one platform that the court case is about. It's all the platforms. If the person does something on Facebook repeatedly, goes to court and gets convicted, then even if this person has never been on Twitter, they must now be banned from Twitter. Even if they've never been there and never done anything wrong there. Otherwise, they can keep hopping.
Okay. Я хочу задать вопрос Саше.
I would like to ask a question to Sasha. He was talking about companies' responsibilities. Could you bring him on screen, please?
Как ты думаешь,
So what do you think?
ответственности компаний
Besides companies' responsibility, what else can be done
этому явлению?
to counteract this hate speech phenomena? What do you think?
So I believe in education. I believe that the world is connected and not live on its own, which means social media are not just the only cause of hatred. It's coming from school, it's coming from parents, it's coming from everywhere. I think that the overall strategy that countries need to take to eradicate anti-Semitism, hatred, and other form of hate speech is by looking at the pyramid as a big picture. Online anti-Semitism is one part of it. Offline is very important to understand how the transition between online and offline is happening. I think that is critical, but more important is using the tools that exist today to connect between people that never met. I grew up in Belgium, where you have a nice and small Jewish community. We have a big immigration from Morocco, Algeria, and other countries. And actually, no one helped me as a Belgian citizen until the age of 18 when I moved to Israel to meet a Moroccan immigrant. We are both immigrants in the same country that today have hate issues and conflict, and no one tried to figure out what's happening, how we can combine. We live neighbor to neighbor, but we never meet. So I think that this is what social media should take on themselves to help educating, connecting, and work together. So, but that's not to eradicate anti-Semitism, that's to educate people to be better people. The last point is to make sure that you have a zero tolerance policy and how you define hatred. I think the definition of anti-Semitism is critical to fight it. How you identified an anti-Semitic content. I think it was said before by Yogev that you have a great work done on older form of anti-Semitism, on contemporary anti-Semitism related to Israeli anti-Zionism issues is not yet considered as anti-Semitism. You have a big gap in the world of proxy words. So today you don't say a Jew, but you say Zionism or Zionist person. But this is actually the same. You have Jewish students beaten up in universities across the world because they are Zionists, not because they are Jew, but actually it's the same. So I think that internet companies should really, really define better anti-Semitism. This is why we're calling on to use the IRA definition of anti-Semitism, and then they can classify different forms of anti-Semitism, why this one is authorized and what this one is not authorized. And at the end, you will see that this is how you're going to clean the platform. And if you add the educational component, I think that you're going to be very, very strong. So these are our recommendations.
Спасибо. Антон, хочу тебя спросить.
Anton, I would like to ask you,
Насколько ты считаешь, такие продукты, которые вы делаете, могут быть...
so what do you think about your products? Can your products be a sort of remedy against bullying and hate speech for young adults, for children, for older people?
Ну, мы надеемся, то есть у нас есть опыт прошлых проектов.
So we have experience of previous projects.
Ну, вот такие дела, например, инфопартнер.
But such things as Alpha Partner, we did our project with them.
Вот что с буллингом, что...
What's important about bullying? There is a certain gray area. So you can see that somebody is bullied, and you don't quite understand. Are you an audience, or maybe you're a participant of this problem? And when you engage people in this interactive act, so then if you're just watching, you make people think that they actually participating in the event. So that's how it works. You know, there's 100 years of movie, and there's 100 years before this theater. You know, there's an actor who plays the role, but when you engage in the play, so you are with the actor. So that's why we do the same. Maybe so we give this opportunity to other people. So, for example, people who never encountered bullying. So, but now they can actually experience it. They can get engaged in it, and they can see what other person feels. You know, so they will understand better. So it's discrimination is intolerable, and many other things are intolerable.
Антон, а вот в продолжение, да?
Anton, continuing to what you say.
Есть ли какой-то замер аудитории, которую вы
Did you actually gauge
скажем так, ваши проекты?
the people who were involved in your project, so who were engaged, who were
грубо говоря, сейчас утрирован, да, довела девушку.
sympathizing with the person, and so, you know, given that example that you gave, you know, the girl that jumped from the roof. So, at what age you can actually show something like that to children? Because it's quite a moral aspect here, you know, and people can be traumatized by this experience.
Наши партнеры, которые внимательно высматривают.
See, our partners who actually watch the content, so it's 12 plus, so in the screenshots you have this like step off the roof, so in the film it's a pause. Maybe there will be another version for people who are older. There is a title that says, so there is a triggering topic, suicide also, so we warn the audience, so what they will watch. Other than that, we didn't gauge it. So the latest series just came out, episodes came out, and where this happening, we more and more views have. So it's very difficult actually to measure interaction. So you can see 15-20 minutes because it's hard to say. You know, the game is going and it's going, and somehow you get to the end of it. What's important?
Измерения всего этого, да, они не квантитативны, не квалитативны.
So measurement tools are not quantitative and qualitative, so they're more qualitative. So, and by the comments we get from the audience, we can see that the change, that people have changed in their life. You know, they consider these things differently. They look at such things differently. So the change may not impact many people. They're actually quite noticeable. So in one project can completely change the understanding of the issue, because, you know, millions of likes actually mean nothing. So because, you know, those few thousands actually change the attitude towards the problem, that's actually quite a good thing.
I have another question for you. How do you stop people using your interactive system with the purpose of changing the story to exacerbate the harm, to choose the path that causes more harm rather than to choose the choices that reduce harm?
And how would you do that? I mean, it's all predefined. There are 4 outcomes. The best outcome where everybody's happy. The last Sorry, I have to do it in Russian. Первый выбор, который...
The first choice that they make, and it's a great one, so everybody's saved and everybody feels great. And
Самый плохой выбор...
the worst outcome when Dasha dies, and to
Ностальгически правильно.
nostalgic ones, so to speak, so the kind of in the middle.
Школу нужно поменять.
So she needs to change the school and all that.
Детерминировано.
So it's all predetermined.
Довести ребенка до суицида.
And it shows that you can actually bring the person to the brink of suicide. And so people who are mentally kind of predictable, so it's going to be hard to watch suicide. And they kind of look at it, kind of sort of mocking at it. So then probably, so they will get certain response from other people. So it's going to be an element of hate speech because it's taken out of the context of the plot and contextualized as a hate speech. So then this person will be getting a response from you and from your colleagues because obviously such a reaction is bad. But we don't really judge here. But in the project there are cards and comments of bloggers. They say there what's good and bad, and hate speech and bullying and cyberbullying is absolutely unacceptable. So that's why we actually say it there. So if somebody wants to kind of warp it, but they're going to be comments in the internet, they can't really break it because it's a movie. So the actors played and it's done. There is a question from the audience.
У меня такой общий немножко вопрос. Это даже не вопрос, комментарий.
It's not really a question. It's more like a comment that will turn into a question. Hello, my name is Julia Gengut. I'm a principal of a school from Samara. That's why this bullying issue and all that is very interesting to me. During the presentation, I saw such words so that
главной героини.
That you make people feel responsible for the life of the heroine there. So and I do read presentations. I read what was in Andre's presentation, and I'm that person who reads everything. So and when you put all the questions about hate speech and fake news.
И вдруг, когда вот все это
And when I was listening to all this, and I just thought to myself that those things are interconnected because internet, this is a responsibility-free space and without personal responsibility. And it's like, it kind of correlates with this, and take responsibility for Dasha's life. So it's easy not to feel responsible. And it seems that when somebody posts something or demonstrates something, they're not responsible because they either reposting or something else in that regard.
Насколько это важно и в каких терминах, вот вопрос,
and how important is it and in what terms?
Вводить понятие личной ответственности.
We need to introduce the personal responsibility point. It's kind of find and punish, money, penalty, whatever.
К тому, как формировать культуру этой
In other words, how to bring up this culture of personal responsibility, because we do have, this knowledge, say, Earth is round, so everybody knows. But some people, they kind of mix the knowledge and opinion. So I have this opinion that Earth is square. So what? So, but that's not knowledge. It's an opinion. But an opinion has a subjective aspect to it. So therefore,
есть платформа, на которой можно формировать.
There's a platform where we can cultivate what is personal responsibility. Because I am, as a principal of the school, I can say there is an educational program, information security and all that.
Так или иначе. Рядом со мной есть учитель из моей школы, поверьте, она тоже много.
And here's my colleague from the school, a teacher, and she did a lot to work with this issue. When we have a phenomenon, so we always need to build a culture around it, So I hope my question is clear. it's personal responsibility. That's the idea. How you actually cultivate personal responsibility.
Ну, смотрите, здесь
I can try.
Да, я скептик по поводу безопасности.
I'm skeptical about security and all that.
Если у вас есть, ну, представим, какие-то невоспитанные люди,
For example, let's say you have like ill-bred people, and you kind of build a fence around them, somehow like impose rules that they will break anyway, so the situation will not go better.
Начинающий психотерапевт мне говорит вот о чем. Есть такая история.
Being a psychotherapist, I can say so. There is a story that kind of touches on many aspects, and our kind of privacy is not quite clear, especially for young people. And so when their body ends, we're like where the other begins and all that. So where people's privacy begins, and their teachers and family members, where the public space begins, because it also has certain borders and all that. So we're not talking about this, but when we make people feel compassion, sympathize with someone, and they may think that, if we do something, we hurt someone. So for us, it's important to move people, to push them from the the point where they're stuck. In our story, we have a small story to it. There is like a shrink in the school that kind of brings certain optimism to the story. And at the end, you can see how the positive changes are happening because of that. So my hypothesis is that we all should be educated how to be more careful with people, how to be more caring with people, and how to actually observe people's privacy. And that's going to be a big step forward. And now the last question. My name is Sofia Naida. My question is, first of all, these projects are very interesting and quite non-standard. And I can think for children it should be very, very interesting, because when we had this project about Anne Frank in Instagram, it was extremely interesting. So we have a Jewish school, we kind of have school in school, and it was extremely interesting, and our students were watching it with great interest. So what you just said, I couldn't get my head around yet, but I'm thinking about it, and it's really, really interesting, and I would love to try it in our school with our director's permission. So this interactive film, does it require certain support from psychologists, from teachers? Do we need to determine our position on that? Because, children, they usually look up at the teachers, and they always look at them as sort of like those who kind of counteract them, in a sense. So what do you think? So see, that's kind of an open discussion topic, because we have certain reporting on this project, so we include all the warnings in the project and all that. So, but on the other hand, I said that we worked with school students, and they were not just actors who came to be filmed. There were school students of 15 and 12, and they were co-participating in it. So that's immediately we said to them, so let's talk informally and participate in the project. So they came, they read the script, and they say, so they don't speak like that. Let's change the phrase. Let's look at the character of the heroine and hero of the film. So they all were participants of this, and we were testing it against them, and we were kind of asking them, is this scene okay with you? So it's like jumping off the roof. Is it okay or not? Because on the internet they can see quite tough content, and they watch porn, surely, and it happens. So, and I would say our project is pretty vanilla. So kind of be extra careful that like 5-year-old wouldn't watch it, but it depends on what you put, like what warning you put there. I had friends who had suicides in their family, and that is important.
I just wanted to highlight that there's actually a distinction we must make. There's the efforts to deal with the majority of the public or the majority of the students, and there's what we do about the psychopaths. And there are psychopaths. And these are different problems. We must keep them separate. I spoke in a comment in a panel I sat in on. I said one of my roles last year, I worked for the education department, and I helped with an inquiry into a school that had some anti-Semitic incidents. And the school did everything right. But there was a small number of students who had their own problems and were terrorising a small number of other students. The response in a situation like this, all the positive things the school did, all of the education they had against anti-Semitism, against racism, the Holocaust education they have, their psychologists and social workers that they had were some of the best in the country. They had the best scores in their responsiveness. All of this does nothing for the few students who are committed to causing problems. And when we're talking about the person committing suicide, there is an internet culture of people where they would not only push them to commit suicide, they will push them to do it on the camera, to watch. This is not normal. We need a response to what's normal, and we need a response to this, and they are different responses.
Спасибо большое. Мне кажется, у нас была очень интересная дискуссия.
Thank you very much. The discussion was very interesting. I would like to thank our speakers and for their presentation. So we have to finish. The time is up. Thank you very much.
Мы открыты для
We're open for discussion, for your thoughts, ideas.
Еврейский конгресс,
Russian Jewish Congress, the Minister of Diaspora, and our organizations, the Institute, online hate speech prevention. So we will continue working together. Thank you very much.